I am a massage lady. I have an old client, Mrs. Mo. Apart from playing mahjong and shopping, she would come to our health center for spa from time to time. The women who come for spa are all dressed up nicely. Maybe it's truly 3 points of appearance and 7 points of dressing. I think they are all elegant women, but there are some women I don't envy. Those single white-collar workers who work nights and earn more just to make their own money and spend it on themselves. It's a bit sad. And then there are the mistresses. Jami, they are all very lonely, although their men give them a lot of money to spend. During New Year's holidays, they always accompany their legal wives and children. Among all the women who come to the health center, I can tell who they are. Most likely, the expressions of white-collar workers are mostly wise, with a bit of the arrogance of intellectuals, and the mistresses, Jami, have silky eyes. The masseurs will also be asked to provide services, of course. Apart from these two types of people, there are also a few happy and leisurely Mrs. Cool, and Mrs. Mo is the happiest among them. Sometimes when there isn't much business, I act as a doorman. I happened to see Mrs. Mo coming that day. Behind her was a shiny car. There was a faint look on the face of the man in the car. Still looking at her, I watched her walk into the health center. The car only started its engine and left. Mrs. Mo smiled at me with a blushing face and said, "My husband sent me." Apparently, she knew that I found her being so close to her husband a little uncomfortable. That's why she explained, because Mrs. Mo looks to be over 40 years old. This was Mrs. Mo's first visit. She happily applied for an annual card. Mrs. Mo whispered, "I played mahjong earlier. I heard the two wives say your spa here is very good. I want to try it too. Can you give me a massage?" She looked at the masseur sign on my chest. I was a little surprised. I didn't expect her to like me, so I took her to the private room. There is a large jacuzzi in the private room, 2 massage tables, and a couch. I took off the unbuttoned uniform skirt at the front. Only a pair of thin white pants remained. The pants were so thin that Mrs. Mo could see inside me that I wasn't wearing anything, because she was about to expose herself in front of me. That's why I dressed like this. It's to give her a sense of security and equality. I began to help Mrs. Mo undress. I saw that her face was flushed all the time. I stopped my hand to unbutton her dress and she said, "Except for my husband." This was the first time I was undressed. I laughed. I knew she was a lucky woman. I only met one man in my life and that man married her. She was soon naked. I saw that her body was no longer young. The breasts were already somewhat sagging. Accessory breasts appeared under the armpits, and there was fat around the waist. I asked her to go into the bathtub and began to wash her. My hand touched her as her body began to age. She sighed slightly and also put her hand on my chest, pinched it and said, "What a good age. I used to have this firmness here." She started telling me about her husband again. I knew from her words that her husband was a businessman. He was rich and loved her. She felt very guilty in the face of her husband in his prime with such a body, so they only have sex with the lights off. She said that when playing mahjong, she heard two wives talk about the spa here. It can be massaged on any area, and seeing them in person after the spa treatment She couldn't help but come. She added that her husband didn't know anything about spas and how exactly it makes a woman beautiful. She didn't want him to know either. I listened intently to what she said while washing her private parts with hot water. She was a little embarrassed. I know she thinks even the color of her private parts is showing her aging. So I told her, "Mrs. Mo, we have a private bleaching here." Her face flushed and I continued, "First, hair removal, then private bleaching. It will be beautiful when it's done." It took a lot of effort to bleach for Mrs. Mo. She looked at the small mirror and was surprised. "It's really beautiful. It seems to go back to the time when she was in her teens," I replied. "Your husband will be pleasantly surprised," she vaguely agreed. I asked her if she wanted a masseur. She was reluctant at first. I said, "Mrs. Mo, oil massage can achieve the best results under the massage of the opposite sex. Besides, your poker buddies are definitely looking for a massage as well, because the wives who come to us all look for a massage." Mrs. Mo finally agreed and I found her, the young Mrs. Zhao Zhao. Since then, Mrs. Mo has become a regular visitor to our health center. I think apart from her bleached private parts to please her husband, it's also because the male massage Zhao Zhao's skills are skilled. Every time Mrs. Mo came, I washed her body and bleached her from time to time. It was also Zhao Zhao who massaged her. I got acquainted with Mrs. Mo and her words went deeper. From the few carat diamond rings on her hand, she talked about their infertility after many years of marriage. But the husband still didn't look for another woman. "Let's talk about it until now." She dares to turn on the lights and be intimate with her husband, and she described her husband so detailed. What a dexterous tongue there is, straight to the bottom of her heart. I could hear the moisture in my eyes. Why is she such a happy woman? Of course, the masseur here, Zhao Zhao, has also pursued me for a long time, but we are all just low-level workers. What happiness will there be when combined? So I have been rejecting Zhao Zhao. Mrs. Mo's words brought my thoughts back. She said her husband always said she was beautiful there. She would just say it was done by a female beautician in the health center. He said when he was there, "You can also enjoy this kind of health preservation." I said I don't serve men. After Mrs. Mo finished speaking, I told her it is not a separate service for male customers, but we have the services of a couple's spa. You can be with your husband and come here to enjoy the service. Do a spa treatment with someone you love. It can undoubtedly better regulate endocrine. This is a project that is not available in general spa halls, but we have it here. I saw Mrs. Mo pondering for a moment. Apparently, she was impressed by my introduction. I smiled imperceptibly at her. I asked Zhao Zhao to serve her again. It was a wintry afternoon. Mrs. Mo with a vigorous man stepped into the door of the health center together. I knew at a glance that he was the one, a man who dotes on her in every way. But how could his eyes linger on my chest? After letting Mr. Mo take a bath with Mrs. Mo, I let them get a massage individually. Mrs. Mo asked me to arrange what kind of girl for her husband. I said, "I'll arrange the ugliest one for him. Rest assured, there is a screen in one room." I was on the left with Mr. Mo and Mrs. Mo, and Zhao Zhao were on the right. Because the screen is huge and the light music surrounds, We don't talk easily on both sides. Mr. Mo is in his 40s, but his figure is clearly well maintained. He said he swims nearly a kilometer a day. I touched his lower abdomen and said, "No wonder there are such perfect abs." He smiled, "You are beautiful and your mouth is sweeter." I massaged him and told him essential oil massage of sexual organs will cause congestion. The best thing to do is to reach an orgasm and bring the congestion down. To achieve complete relaxation, in order to achieve the effect of health preservation. I asked him again what he wanted to do to orgasm, and he said, "Sit down on me." I was like a flower, blooming delicately on his underbelly. I know his wife and Zhao Zhao are just behind the screen, but I still couldn't help it. Mr. Mo's temptation to me. Mr. Mo is rich and talented, gentle to his infertile wife. Moreover, only I know this best. I bleached Mrs. Mo's private parts to make her have a better visual. Those who dare to turn on the lights and share a room with Mr. Mo, but Mr. Mo must have found out that the private parts of Mrs. Mo, who has never given birth to a child, no matter how tight the interior is, can't compare to my youthful invincibility. Besides, Mrs. Mo drooped there. How can it be compared to my waist without a trace of fat? I have a delicate body. I am subverting Mr. Mo, feeling him feel it. With unprecedented excitement, his face turned hideous and erupted inside me. He said sorry repeatedly. I laughed and said, "Don't you have children yet? I'll give you one." Mr. Mo was taken aback, but he didn't reject my proposal. He said, "Your body is really good, or not. I'll really keep you. You give me a fat white son." I pretended to say, "Mrs. Mo said that you never look for women." Mr. Mo said, "It was because the women who seduced me didn't have enough capital." I looked down and saw Mr. Mo, and I was excited again. Presumably, he really wasn't satisfied with Mrs. Mo for a long time. Mrs. Mo also said that she felt good about herself. Mr. Mo appreciated her very much for her pink private parts. He just didn't want to hurt her self-esteem. "Tomorrow you quit your job and I will arrange your life." Suddenly, I felt like I had been slapped in the face. It hurt hotly. Because of the light in this room, it was from the side of me and Mr. Mo. Our figures all fell on the screen. It's like a lively shadow puppet show. Mrs. Mo tiptoed to hide behind the screen. Hearing me and Mr. Mo talking and seeing my every move, she stepped forward and gave me a slap in the face. Mr. Mo was stunned. He pushed me off him right away and put on his clothes and pants at once. He and Mrs. Mo called the owner of the health center together, saying I sexually assaulted him during the spa. Even Zhao Shao said the same. I saw a look of disdain in his eyes. I knew he hated me. She is a woman who is greedy for vanity and wants to fly on the branches without shame. The boss was afraid of offending the customers, so he apologized to them while resolutely letting me go. I was left on the streets, not knowing where to go.